Lessons Not Yet Learnt is a podcast that uncovers the costly mistakes that businesses keep making and how to finally move past them. Through storytelling, candid conversations, and expert perspectives, I'm on a mission to challenge outdated thinking, bring those overlooked lessons to the surface, and drive meaningful change, one story at a time. Hi, welcome to Lessons Not Yet Learnt. I'm your host, Kiran Kachela. On today's episode, we're going to talk about a familiar story that keeps on repeating itself. Organisations throwing millions at new tech only to find that it doesn't solve their problem. Now, at my company CI Projects, we see this all the time because we're often called in after things have gone terribly wrong. We kind of get this front row seat, and I see firsthand the impact it has. We see budgets spiralling out of control. We see plans that have been delayed. Programs that should have taken 12 months or 18 months end up taking 3 to 4 years. We see the emotional toll it takes on humans, the stress, the strain, the fatigue, the resistance to change that's generated out of distrust. All of this could have been avoided if they had just stopped to do the groundwork and get it right first time. Now, I have the perfect example of this. Our client was a global construction giant, and they were embarking on this significant transformation program that was digitally led, and this was the program of all time. They had never planned to invest so much in any transformation program before. Now, when they first started this program, the board became quite fixated on one particular thing: what to name the program. They wanted to give it a secret code name, and they spent so much time doing that they actually forgot to define the objectives of the program. Now, for the purposes of keeping the client's identity protected, I'm just going to call this program Project Mars. So this program name was so coded that nobody actually knew what the program was all about. About a year into the program, my team were called in because the board were getting frustrated. They weren't seeing the level of progress and momentum that they were expecting 12 months in, and some of the things that they had implemented, they were seeing no benefits from. The problems weren't being solved. I wanted to meet with the 3 program directors that had been assigned on this significant transformation. I went to meet with the first director, and I wanted to get a good understanding from them on what the program was all about, what the objectives were, understand how they felt about the program. So I went to meet with them and asked them all of those questions, and I came away from the meeting really confused because they weren't able to actually articulate to me what this program was set out to achieve. They couldn't clearly articulate why this program had started and what the objectives were. I then went to meet with the second director, thinking, it's fine, they're going to clear it all up for me and tell me everything about this program. So I went to meet with them, and I came away from that meeting even more baffled. I was totally lost, because they had given me a completely different description of the program to what the first director gave me. So at this point, I really had no idea what this program was about and thought, okay, I'm going to pin all my hopes up on the last third director. I went to meet with them, and guess what? They gave me a completely different answer. So here we have 3 program directors, very intelligent people that had been working on the program for over 12 months now, and they were completely misaligned. This program had no elevator pitch. And you can imagine if there's that misalignment and confusion at the top of the chain, the rest of the program team were in absolute chaos, and the wider business didn't have a clue what was going on and what it meant for them. So immediately I started to see some alarm bells. So we rolled our sleeves up, and my team were ready to get in and help fix things. But to the board's horror, What we didn't do was go in and put our foot on the gas. Oh no. Instead, we slammed the brakes. We needed to put a stop to all of this. We pulled them all into a room, we went back to basics, and we started with why this program was happening, what the objectives were, what the success criteria was, what did good look like. We worked through the scope, we worked through the plan, we worked through which stakeholders were going to be impacted by the change, and we worked through what the problems were and what processes needed to be redesigned. We did an entire overhaul. This process took between 2 to 3 weeks, but that defining stage was absolutely critical because this was a significant investment. I'm pleased to say that after that initial 3 weeks of definition, we got on with the job, we helped them execute the program, and 12 months later, they had saved hundreds of thousands of pounds on license fees and efficiencies. And this is a great success story. However, the amount of money wasted in the first year was in the millions, and all of that could have been completely avoided had they just taken the time to define the problem and define the scope and define the objectives of the program up front. Now, in case you're wondering what this program, Project Mars, actually was, it was just a program to replace a few different internal systems and to connect a few systems together. But at the start of the program, they couldn't even define which systems they were actually going to focus on and replace. This story isn't just another cautionary tale. We are seeing this play out over and over and over again. Organizations throwing millions at new tech without fixing the underlying foundations that sit beneath. And this is just amplifying the chaos. This is the lesson that I'm really keen to dive into today. I'm really pleased to introduce my guest, Jat, who is the Director of Quality at Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children. He has spent over 16 years within the pharmaceutical industry and over a decade in the NHS. Both industries are embracing tech to drive forward. So Jat has seen the highs and the lows, and I'm really keen to explore further. Hi, Jat. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you for having me, Kiran.
So, Jat, talk to me about your background. You've had quite an interesting background.
I have, yeah. A chemist by trade. Spent 16 years in the pharmaceutical industry, working a number of roles that I started off in development, assurance, vendor management, development, and then finally project management.
Project management. And now you're the Director of Quality.
I am indeed.
Yes. And what does that entail?
Well, I have a fabulous team. So for me, not a huge amount. They do a great job. They're fantastic. But the role itself, so the team itself, the quality team, is a combination of assurance, outcomes, audit, quality improvement. And we're very fortunate. We've got our own in-house developers and analysts as well to support us.
Fantastic. It's a whole ecosystem that has to make an organisation work.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you've, having worked in the pharmaceutical environment and then in the NHS more recently, you've seen a lot of tech implementations. Many, I'm sure, have gone well and many that haven't. What's your experience?
It's exactly that. It's a mixed bag.
Mixed bag.
Yeah. Some have gone well, some haven't. But with those ones that haven't, there's always been an underlying theme in terms of why they haven't gone well.
And what's that theme then?
It's about making sure that you're getting the fundamentals right, the processes, the foundations before you go away and overlay these digital transformation projects or technological transformation projects over.
And you probably see that even more so with the lens of quality now.
Yes. I mean, being a chemist, so I'm quite analytical by nature anyhow. But with the sort of continuous improvement mindset, that learning mindset, you're far more aware of these issues as and when they come. Sometimes you can predict them.
Yes. Okay. So give me an example of where you have been able to predict it.
I'll give you an NHS example. I've worked with 4 NHS organisations now. Each one of those have gone through their own EPR, so moving over to a digital electronic patient record. The intention was always actually that the EPRs would always fundamentally fix some of the issues that they were experiencing day to day. All they've really done is they've put a digital onto an analog and not really addressed the fundamentals that were causing them issues, constraints within the system, inefficient processes, bottlenecks, waste.
So did they actually cleanse the data that they had before they moved it across?
No. Yeah, it was a straightforward copy-paste.
Copy-paste. Yes. And what was the impact of that?
Well, it resulted in longer appointments, more bureaucracy, potentially more delays.
And what about the internal effect, right? So obviously, yes, the project would have spiraled out of control in terms of, extended timelines, extended budgets to get it right. There was an impact on patients, which was probably the most significant impact of all. What about the team involved?
Well, the clinical teams, they're fabulous. Irrespective of whichever organisation you work for, the clinical teams are the backbone of the NHS. And for them, it's quite demoralising because all they want to do is offer fantastic patient care. And then there's these processes that kind of prevent them from doing it.
Were you able to predict that was going wrong? Could you see that quite early on?
Yeah, one trust in particular, where I was fortunate enough to be sort of there prior to implementation, and I was there in an improvement capacity as well. I asked the question: Have we looked at our processes? Have we make them as effective as possible? And actually, have we set them up or designed them in such a way that they would work in a digital environment? With all these sorts of things, Kiran, the emphasis is on speed.
Yes.
And getting these in as quickly as possible, and we'll kind of fix that later mentality. And that's a common feature.
It is, isn't it? There's this drive to just get things done quickly, see quick results. And I'm not sure how that gets prioritized sometimes over the fact that people know it's going to go terribly wrong if they don't get the data and the processes right.
Yeah, I mean, you think there's enough organisational memory to see these things come around, as they always often do. And invariably, we get a very similar sort of result. I mean, the NHS is not unique in this. I assure you, my experience with the private sector was very, very similar in some of the large sort of transformation projects that came through. There's this mad rush. There's pressure, isn't there? The internal pressure, there's ex-shareholder pressure to get things implemented as soon as possible so that we can get some sort of return on investment. And if you flick that into an NHS or a public sector organisation, we've got reporting cycles. You've got to hit activity targets. So there's all those pressures to implement something as quickly as possible. And we don't always assess the unintended consequences of doing that.
No. And where do the good sort of practice project management principles come into this then? So, with any project, you would expect at that point that those risks would be flagged and managed and mitigated. Was that part of those programs that you've been involved in?
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
We've always had formal sort of programs set up for these things. But invariably, as time slips and timelines slip, with good intention, there is a need to cut corners.
So almost the pressure to just deliver results in us needing to accept some of the risks associated with rushing.
Yeah, I don't think it's accepting risk. I think they're just inherent in terms of how the program works. It's just a case of actually we've got a timeline that we need to hit. In some cases, there's penalties if we don't complete by a certain time as well. So there's sort of financial impact of not completing. And I suppose once you've weighed that up, someone's taken the decision to miss out things that aren't as important to them.
Yeah. And in that example, how long did it take to recover from the pain?
So for the EPR one, I think it was a couple of years easy, 2 to 3 years. Yeah.
So how long was the program meant to take?
So, I mean, the actual implementation was 18 months, and it actually happened on time with all the ones I've actually seen. They all meet their sort of deadlines, but the impact in terms of then having to unravel and unpick and redo some of the things that we should have done, you're talking 2-3 years later, post-project completion.
Yeah, so almost, more than double the time it should have taken.
And cost.
Exactly. I often see that common practice of we go and put new tech and automate things without looking at the processes, and even the processes that we think we're automating, we're not ever going back to those processes and saying, are these processes right? Do we need to rationalize and streamline them before we automate? And I think sometimes we're automating process steps that shouldn't even exist.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Again, I think you digitize dysfunction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Digitizing dysfunction. That's exactly what I see all the time. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. So what about in the pharmaceutical industry, similar sort of tech projects?
Yeah. I mean, obviously they're on a multi-million-pound scale. One example, we bought in a new powder filling machine. All good intention. It was to replace an existing bit of kit that had been running for years and years and years, a very reliable kit. They chose to sort of go to a radical new design because it was going to be quicker, give us better, consistent weights. One thing they didn't sort of factor in were the mechanics of the powders themselves. And actually we ended up having a very sort of technological headache then to try and manage thereafter.
It's the mess, the cleanup job at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And during that cleanup job, do you think there's enough investment to clean it up? Because often there's lack of investment to do it right in the first place. And then what about the cleanup?
You just get on with it.
You just get on with it.
You have technical teams actually that's what they're paid to do.
Just to clean up.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? Sometimes you can see roles that have been created purely to fix problems.
Yeah.
Rather than fixing the root cause of why the problem exists.
Yes.
We've gone and added another team, another person, another spreadsheet, another audit, another step, basically.
Yeah.
So you've seen a lot of that.
Yes.
What are those repeated traits you're seeing across all the different industries?
I suppose there's sort of three sort of attributes to it, and sort of 3 Ps, I would call it. So you have purpose. So actually, do we know why we're doing something? The people, again, our staff are our most valuable resource. And actually, are they engaged? Do they understand it? And then process. Actually, we've got to get the processes right for the thing that we're trying to do. And that's where actually things kind of fall down. And actually, if any one of those don't happen, your chances of failure are sort of increase significantly.
Exactly. All 3 need to work in combination. And the technology is almost just the enabler. It's not the driver, which is often the way in which it's presented itself in organizations.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is why I hate the word digital transformation, because it never is a digital transformation, is it? It's transformation, and digital aspect is just an element of a wider transformation.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I 100% agree with that, because we're not getting it's like building a house. I always use this analogy, but if you're building a house, you're going to be able to build a house on solid foundations. And those solid foundations are those 3 Ps that we just discussed. And without any one of those, the structure is inherently unstable.
Exactly. Yeah. So just breaking down those 3 Ps then. So purpose, what do you commonly see happen?
Someone has a vision, which is great. Visions are great, but they're not always clearly articulated or thought. Maybe not even be thought through. Actually, what are we actually trying to deliver? What are our outcomes? And if they aren't thought through in a coherent, logical way, it's very then difficult to then tell the people what it is that you're trying to do.
Exactly. Yeah, it's almost a blind leading the blind at the end of it, isn't it?
It kind of becomes that way.
Yeah,
yes.
It does become that way. Okay, so not having that clear articulate what this project is about, what we're trying to achieve, what the problem is that we're trying to fix.
Yes.
Okay. People. What do you often tend to see?
Well, people are the ones that are going to be using these processes day to day, innovations or whatever technology that you're bringing in. They need to know actually that it's going to help them. It's going to make a difference. It's going to make their lives a little bit easier. Why do we need to bring this in? Actually, what's broken now? So there's several elements that you kind of very clearly need to sort of articulate in terms of why we're doing this thing that we're doing.
And how well do you think people are engaged with during the program? So if we take the electronic patient record program as an example, and you said, the clinicians are trying to do their job and they're the heartbeat of the organization. What was the engagement like with them during that program? I mean,
yeah. So any kind of engagement is difficult, particularly in a large, complex organization like an NHS trust. You've got consultants, you've got nurses, you've got admin assistants, you've got other corporate services that all have to feed in. There'll be IT as well. There'll be estates, and trying to bring all those functions together to then come up with a robust, sustainable program of work is incredibly difficult to do.
Not engaging with them also has damaging impacts. You can't get to everybody, but were there working groups set up? How early were they engaged?
Yes, working groups were set up with all these, and early engagement as well. But if you think about it, everyone's got different priorities, different perspectives, and not everyone is on the same page.
No, not everyone's on the bus. Yeah,
yes.
You need to work out who's not on the bus and how we get them on the bus. But that's a big change management piece, and I feel that that's often underestimated and underinvested in.
In terms of engaging the people and making sure that they're on board is a phenomenal piece of work to have to do. And we'll just use a healthcare example for it. Your consultants. You'll have nursing, you'll have admin. They'll all have different reasons for wanting to input into the project because they all want something different out. May not all want the same thing. Actually, the same thing is we deliver fantastic patient outcomes.
Yes.
That's why we go to work. But in terms of their day-to-day, what are the things that frustrate them? And it's ensuring that actually we can develop a coherent enough picture so that whatever solution that we put into place addresses all of that, because actually without doing that, you're not going to bring those people on board.
No, exactly. And I agree with you. In any organization, you will have different teams with different requirements, different value drivers. One might be more interested in cost, another one might be more interested in efficiency, another one might be more interested in patient care. It can really vary. But actually, the first step is actually being able to understand what those value drivers are.
Yes.
Getting all of that fleshed out, making it transparent. And then, as you say, trying to work through, well, how are we supporting each one of these to be able to work through the communication and engagement and getting them onto the bus?
I mean, anyone who's been in the NHS long enough, or any organisation that, for that matter, you sort of develop a sense of learned helplessness as well.
Yeah.
Goes on there. You get change fatigue because you see these things come around. If you stay with the organisation long enough, you'll see the same change come around several times. And then it's trying to persuade, them, and they've got a very valid input, that actually this is a good thing to do when they've probably been there and then had to deal with the unintended consequences of that change as well. It's quite difficult.
Isn't that the big mistake? The fact that sometimes we are seeing these same changes come around over and over again, sometimes a year, sometimes 5 years, sometimes 10 years later, we're back to square one. We're fixing the same problems because we never really fixed the root cause in the first place. And it does cause a huge amount of fatigue. People have those experiences, those lived experiences, yes. And it's very hard to trust the next change initiative if in the past it's never gone so well. So
exactly what you've just said there, Kiran, not learning from experience, not learning from these failed transformations, not necessarily failed, but actually haven't really achieved the goal that we wanted to achieve. So we're sort of having to go back round and try something different. So how do we learn from failure? I mean, that's the big thing, isn't it? Actually, how do we take that learning and apply it in a way so that next time when we go and we do another program of work, actually we've taken those considerations on board. Invariably, you'll have different teams working with different program managers, and a lot of that learning is kind of lost. It kind of gets consigned to history, and we don't sort of learn from it. What we are now doing, we're doing a lot of more sort of AARs, after action reviews, and that's then forming a body of learning that others can then sort of benefit from going forward.
We often do lesson learn reviews after a project, and we may even document that, and that gets saved on a shared drive somewhere, and no one ever opens it again. It gathers dust and we never learn from it. And I think it's so important to be experimenting and trying different things so that we can learn from these lessons and not repeat them over and over again. And that's why we're doing this podcast. It's why you're doing those after action reviews as well. We need to start figuring out new ways of learning lessons and actually putting them into action.
Yeah, and that's where, improvement science comes in play. I mean, it's such a simple philosophy, but it's so effective. We go back to the EPR example that I gave you earlier, just applying simple things like theory of constraints, for example. Dr. Goldratt, who came up with the 5-stage process. Understand your process, remove your bottlenecks, constraints, make it efficient. Within any organisation I work with, whether that's public or private, the first reaction is just to throw more resource at something, rather than actually fundamentally looking at the processes. And actually, you never really fully utilise the benefit of that additional resource, because we actually haven't really looked at and fixed the sort of fundamentals.
I agree. It amazes me how many times we do see that reaction of let's throw more resources at it. If it's not working, let's throw more resources at it. And I was recently working on a project with a client where I came in, they said things weren't working. And when I asked them, what was the problem? What's the problem? Talk to me about what the problem is. The response was, we need more people. And I said, well, how do you know you need more people? Why is that a problem? What evidence do you have to suggest you need more people? And they couldn't articulate that. They just assumed that they have a problem because they need more people. And it took some time to sort of get to the bottom of this program, this problem, to understand that it was nothing to do with people at all. But it took some time to get them we needed the evidence for them to be able to understand that this wasn't a people problem.
Yes.
But it is the common response, isn't it? If there's a problem, we need more people. That's the common response.
Yeah, it's all about capacity. Actually, you want us to do more, you give us the capacity, we'll do more. But actually, we don't really fundamentally go back and address the processes to start off with. Actually, are they efficient and as effective as they can be? Invariably, they're not. But just applying those very simple concepts of improvement science, and it doesn't take much. And actually, we can have a profound impact on the effectiveness of our workflows.
I agree. So we've talked about purpose, we've talked about people, we've started to touch a bit more on process, and I know we've touched on it a bit. Just talk me through, what are the common things you see when it comes to process? And
again, irrespective of industry here, you'll have some process that has been set up a decade ago, maybe 2-3 decades ago, not particularly well documented, not been reviewed, not been updated based on current best practice. And what happens is you have lots of pockets of expertise. Everyone's doing something slightly different. And as you know, variation is waste.
It's the enemy.
It is.
Variation is the enemy.
Exactly. So what it does is everyone ends up doing something slightly different, and we get different outcomes. And obviously, irrespective of whether you're working in the pharmaceutical industry or in healthcare, that's bad. any kind of thing that leads to a defect is a bad outcome, be that for a pharmaceutical product that you're manufacturing or for a patient, for example.
Exactly. Our processes are riddled with variation, and it has been exactly what you've said. Either that there is no single source of truth of what the process actually is, or they've documented a process once upon a time and never updated it, never looked at it again, so it's gathered dust, or they've documented something in a quality manual which isn't reflective of what actually happens in real life.
Yes.
So it's, it's
work is done. Work is done. Work is imagined.
Yes, exactly. It's theoretical rather than practically what actually happens. And so this is something I'm really trying to address, actually, because I see it happen all the time. And we often get called in to come and work on helping them design and define what their processes are. I want to know how those processes are going to be maintained. Who's owning those processes? Who's going to be updating them? How often are you going to update them? And actually, in many cases, some organizations haven't developed those capabilities or the capacity to be able to maintain those processes. And in which case we'll support that. But it's the fact that we just need to move away from documenting something one-off and ticking a box and saying, right, we've done it now. That's not the purpose of a process map.
Exactly. Yeah. In my current role, I pulled together a standard work framework, a playbook, we call it. So we do exactly that. We follow the sort of theory of constraints where we map our processes out. We identify sources of waste, identify areas of efficiency gain. Once everyone's happy, and that's the other thing as well, everyone's got to be happy with the new processes. They've all got to be part of designing those processes so that they are invested. That's the main thing. Again, we go back to the people aspect, making sure that our staff are invested. Once they're invested and they accept the new way of working, you sort of document that. So standard operating procedure or a guideline or a policy or whatever form you choose. And then there's sort of periodic sort of revisiting of that, but also in terms of training new members of staff, you've got a single source of truth. So when you're training, you're limiting the amount of variation or interpretation that new member of staff. Everyone applies their own learned experience. You always look through your own lens, but actually what you're doing is you're limiting that level of variation that new member of staff takes forward. And then if there are changes that need to be made, or you need to make an exception to the written process, we've sort of come up with a almost like a change management process, depending on the severity, and there's a level of sort of peer review or decision making that needs to happen to ensure actually we're not introducing risk into our new process, and it works pretty well. That's
good. So you've got a good level of adoption and engagement in that framework, that governance framework.
Yes.
Excellent. Is that aligned to ISO 9001? Is quality, is that something you're aligning yourselves to?
We are aligning ourselves to all of that. As part of my fellowship, we have to do a piece of work, and I actually chose to design a quality governance blueprint. I have a copy in my bag if you'd like to see it. Yes. And what I tried to do with that was, come up with a set of standards that demonstrate what does good look like at Great Ormond Street. So I pulled from ISO 9001, 31000, 7101, which is, I think, is a healthcare variant of 9001, the CQC standards and statements, because obviously they're our regulators, a number of other governance, so sort of internationally recognized governance standards, and pulled them all together into a single set of standards. I mean, there's a huge overlap between all of them. But what we end up doing is we end up trying to apply ourselves to each. Again, huge duplication, huge overlap between all of those, and we end up sending the same information to several different sources in different formats. The whole purpose of trying to do this was that we came up with one set of standards, which we would then assess ourselves against as well. So we created We turn them into self-assessment standards. So we score ourselves, we'd understand, we try to identify where the gaps in the organisation were, and then put appropriate mitigation in place to address those.
So a more proactive approach rather than a reactive approach. And I would say there's a reason why you see a lot of similarities in those standards. It's because it's best practice.
Exactly.
It's best practice for a reason, isn't it? And it isn't just a tick box exercise. And I think when people look at things in retrospect, it becomes a reactive tick box exercise and, cover yourselves type activity rather than, well, actually, if we proactively follow this best practice, we should avoid any issues.
Yeah.
And that's the driver that I assume you're trying to push.
Yeah. I mean, you won't stop everything and you won't be able to mitigate against every potential error that could happen. But what you're doing is you're actually limiting because actually you've assessed yourselves against industry standards. Not just within healthcare, but actually international requires industry standards. Yeah.
Exactly. So what's the one key lesson that you think organizations need to learn when it comes to implementing tech?
Oh, good question. Slow down to speed up.
Slow down to speed up. Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much, Jat. It's been great to have you on today's episode.
Thank you for having me.
So the CI fix from today's episode is purpose, people, process. Purpose, we need to be clear why we're doing this project. What's the problem we're actually trying to fix? People, that should not be an afterthought. We should be thinking about the stakeholders impacted and how we're going to engage them right from the start of the program. And yes, we can't get round to everybody, but we really do need to make sure that we understand all of the stakeholders impacted and what value means for them, because it's only then that you can make sure that you're able to respond to their value drivers and communicate and engage accordingly. Make sure you have the right change management strategy that's tailored to their values. And process, making sure that we don't start automating something before we actually review the process and say, is this process even right? Do we even need to automate this process step, or should it be eliminated entirely? Making sure we have those clearly defined processes and a way to continue to maintain them. They should not be gathering dust in a shared drive. Somebody needs to own the process and continually monitor and maintain and improve. That's our CI fix from today's episode, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.